minutes of the last meeting, and that was the meeting on the 21st of May. So if I go through it page by page, any comments or anything that needs alteration? Page 1, okay. Page 2, okay. Page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9. So happy that I sign those off as a true record. Okay, thank you very much. So next item, agenda item 5, and that's Q4 financial monitoring report. So that's the year-end position for the financial year that is now finished, and Mark's going to talk us through it.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for the technical malfunction there. So I'm presenting the report for the year ended. Paragraph 3.1 notes that we ended the year with a budget surplus of just under £1 million. If I cast your mind back to when we set the budget, in February 23, that assumed that we would have a draw on reserves to cover the budget deficit of £1.7 million. So whilst we're calling the year end a surplus, it is in fact a reduced draw on those reserves. That's better than we had anticipated at the third quarter, and the bullet points there just summarise that. Now, there is a huge amount of detail in this report, and I'm conscious of the time and other matters on the agenda, so I don't propose to go through it in great detail. Appendix 1 is particularly useful in terms of identifying the key variances against the report, and in terms of the recommendations, at the end of the report proposes that we transfer that surplus to the transformation reserve, pending the other pressures that the Council faces, both in terms of future budget deficits and those items that were noted at the end of the budget report in February 23 as pressures the Council faces, but at the moment don't form part of the budget. For example, ash dieback and the other ones that were drawn to members' attention at the time. I think at that point, Chair, I'm happy to take any particular questions that members have.
Thank you very much. I'm looking for hands and questions. Alex, you wouldn't let me down.
Thank you. Yes, so there's one quick comment I wanted to make, because I know previous members of this council had mentioned in Q3 where our revenue was below projections for the car parking, that perhaps this was a pattern was emerging, that we were wrong to put car parking prices up, and I'm glad to see in the report that in Q4 it's recovered, when clearly the costs in Q3 have been all the flooding. So I'm glad that our revenue is held up on that point. And the main question I had was around 4.9 housing benefit subsidies, so the net cost of housing benefits. Now this shows a variance of, I think, almost £500,000, and there's some narrative that explains that, and how that in previous years we would have recovered more of the net of the overpayments to basically come out at a 0 point, and how we should be addressing this mostly in year. But as this overspend, or this variance to the budget has been roughly the same for about 5 years, my question was, is there something we should be changing in the budgeting around this? Because if we had a plan to solve it, that would be good, but I don't see any reason why this wouldn't happen in future either.
Happy
To answer that, Chair, if you wish. Thank you, Alex. This is something that's been an iterative process, as you've noticed. So in the years pre-COVID, we're in a position where the level of housing subsidy loss was largely overset by recovery of overpaid benefits. And these two things, there's a big timing difference between the two things. So it's not really that easy to set them as separate gross items. But so what we used to do was present just a net budget, which was about £30,000 difference. But as we moved into COVID, and in fact the years coming up to that, the difference began to grow. So we began aware that there was a growing pressure, that the level of subsidy loss was becoming greater than the recovery of benefits, and that was partly to do with changes in the housing benefit system and the move to universal credit, which made those kind of differences and started to raise this as an issue. It was then reinforced through COVID because we were subsidised by grant. So the housing subsidy loss remained, but we suspended any recovery of overpayments. So there was a long period when we weren't doing our normal processes for recovering overpayments and errors like that. But that was met by government, so those costs were offset there. But we continued that process through the cost of living crisis, so we made a local decision to make sure that we weren't being overly aggressive or we took some time to reinstate those processes. So at that point, we were a bit unclear as to what the actual value of that net position would be. And now, of course, we have reinstated our recovery processes, and we're now trying to gauge again what that gap is. But as you've noticed, the net position between the housing subsidy loss, about 700,000, and the recovery of overpayment benefits, about 300,000, is about 400,000 pounds. So we need to work out whether that's stable, whether that's going to continue like that or go forward. So this year, for the first time, we took the decision to add £100,000 into the budget to start to address that budget gap. So the intention is that that will increase rather than trying to do it all at once, while we continue to understand exactly what that level will be. So you're quite right, it is an issue. It's something we've been grappling with for a while, and we've developed a strategy for trying to deal with that. And of course, there is all the other work going on around how do we stop the housing subsidy loss in the first place? How do we have more affordable housing, which is at local housing rates, so we don't lose the subsidy benefit on that? So there's a lot of work going on that side of the deal as well. In time, that should get us to a position where we feel that we've got that sufficiently covered in the budget every year, but without a dramatic impact which may have a really significant effect, which at this stage we're not quite sure what that effect would be. So I know I'm hedging my bets here. It's a cautious response, but I think it is something that has been moving a lot over the years. So it's appropriate, I think, to take our time to resolve it. But we're well aware of it. It's something we do need to address. So thanks for raising that.
Thank you. It is complicated, and I've had it explained to me before. Karen Lewin?
Thank you, Chair. I've just got two questions. One is 4.6, it's about our transport maintenance. I see it's gone up 21%, and it's partly due to the age of vehicles. And I'm just wondering, because in the Environment Committee in 2022, we brought forward some funding to bring some new refuse collection vehicles earlier. And I'm wondering if, with those coming, do we expect this to come down? Is this part of the refuse vehicles, or is it other vehicles as well? And have we got more money perhaps coming to replace our old vehicles? That's my first question, if that's right. Yeah.
Through you, Chair. The City Ops team have a total of just over 80 vehicles, of which the RCVs, the refuse trucks, I think there's about 10 of them, are obviously the biggest and the most expensive to maintain. So as they age, that tends to influence the cost of the annual repairs. The introduction of new ones will obviously help. Aside from that, it's difficult without doing a lot more detail than this to give a more detailed explanation. Inflation has certainly had an impact. And the introduction of new vehicles will hopefully address the cost, but it is an ongoing challenge with a fleet of that size. I think the general comment I'd make is that the Gareth Roberts, who now manages the fleet, does seem to have some positive ideas on how we can better manage it in terms of which replacements we make and as and when we do those, which I think is quite positive.
Thank you. And this is just about, you know, the budget surplus that we have, and then we've got a list of projects, and obviously we've got the one for food waste collection. And I was just wondering, I know that we had a gap in the funding that we're expecting, and I was wondering whether we've had any update at all, please. Whether that gap has, yeah.
Through you, Chair. The short answer is no. We've not had any update. We had an initial capital allocation, and we wrote to the department to say that that was insufficient. We did then receive a top-up allocation, but that didn't bear any resemblance to the shortfall that we had identified. It looked somewhat as an arbitrary amount. I think it was about 149,000 or something. So we still have, we believe, a shortfall in the capital allocation, and there's been no news out of the department. We are doing some work, members will know, most members will know, we are doing some work now to crystallise those costs, to bring back those costs to committee, because at the moment they've been based on estimates. And we are still waiting to hear on the revenue allocation. And at the moment there has been no news from government. We have raised this with the department, and the feedback was, bear with us. There are lots of these outstanding at the moment, and we will get back to you as soon as possible. We're hopeful that we will get the answer soon, because it will start to impinge on the timetable if we are to start collection of food waste by March 26. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a few questions, if that's okay. But first, I just want to thank officers. We always get these reports, and I don't think anyone can quite appreciate the amount of work that goes in to try and balance our finances at the council at the moment. And I think it's commendable what officers have done in terms of bringing this report. A few questions. The first one is, I noticed that EV charging income for the electric vehicles, is that a full year figure? Or is that just a half-year figure? I know it's a year-end, but is that for the whole year? Is that figure that we've got there?
Yes, that figure is for the full year, bearing in mind that some charges were introduced during the year.
Thanks, that's what I thought. Just wanted to clarify that. In terms of the garden waste income, we seem to be 7,000 below, is it 7k below budget? And there's been previously, this has been always a very high uptake in the garden waste collection. Is this something we ought to be wary of or concerned about?
Yes, you're correct. It was very slightly below the budget, but I can confirm that since the year end, so the start of this year, we've continued to see new accounts opening, and the income is still progressing quite strongly.
And then I have a question about in relation to the collection of council tax and the business rates. We seem to be below target in that. Is that something that we ought to be monitoring more better, or be a bit more careful, or is it something that we need to be aware of or concerned about?
Through you, Chair, this is something we're always monitoring. We have a Revenues and Benefits Management Board which meets every month, and we review the figures and try to ensure that we maximise those. For this current year, we are now above target, so I think the position has improved against what it was at for the year that has just passed. So I think there's been good progress on that.
And then just one final question. Sorry, you can tell I've read the report. Car park income. I know that my colleague has mentioned about the car park income being better than expected. There was at one point when the income was a little bit low. Can officers confirm that is when those particular car parks were flooded and there was no income? Is it for that reason? Are we sure about that, or is it anything else going on there? If
I've misunderstood the question, then please stop me. But So the council's income for last year, I think, was slightly below the budget, but that was obviously given the increase in prices and compared to the pre-flood levels, the income is greater than it was before. So I think it is more than recovered.
Thank you. First of all, on page 18, the development management, significant drop in income, which is explainable by the fact that there are less planning applications and other situations. So the actual applications dropped by 15%, but the actual income dropped by 40%. So based on that, have you carried that lower figure into the current year, or how are you reflecting the budget on that?
Through you, Chair. Yes, this is another area that's slightly iterative. Where over a number of years we've been trying to establish an appropriate budget for development management, and in the past it has often made an allowance for a number of high-value items, planning decisions coming through, which we have not had many in the last couple of years. So it's tended to flatten out, and we have started a process again of reducing the budget there. So we put in a reduction for that for the year that we're currently in, and we'll continue to keep that under view. So yes, it's an area where we think we're probably over budgeting in terms of income. So we're starting to reduce that now.
Thank you, much appreciated. The only other thing that I want to raise is on page 21, the pocket park in Hopton Street. I didn't know there was a pocket park in Hopton Street. Are you referring to Sanctuary Park?
Yes, I think so.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any other questions. Thank you to officers. You know, the year-end financial position, it absolutely is a very significant achievement at many levels and on many counts, and it is a result of some of the difficult decisions that we made during the year and the voluntary redundancy programme, and that kind of, you know, validates some of those difficult decisions. The council remains ambitious. There are lots of things we want to do, so I think it's the decision to use that surplus in inverted commas and to put it into earmarked reserves to make up our reserves, because there is a number of really important things that we have to do and that we really want to do. So this is about enabling our financial position and to consider those things going forwards next financial year. So thank you to everybody for the work that's gone into it. So the recommendations: to note the financial monitoring details for the year end, approving the write-off of council tax and business rates for the quarter ended on the 31st of March. That's a formal decision. Agree the balances on earmark reserves at the 31st of March, and the committee considers officer recommendations on the allocation of the budget surplus as detailed in paragraph 9.5 at the end of the report. All those in favour? Thank you. That's a unanimous decision. There are rumours and debate as to whether this is or isn't Mark's last meeting. So we can give you a half a fond farewell, but we may see you again in September. Thank you. Next item is, I think if we do agenda item 6, the Swan Theatre Community Asset Transfer. So this is Kevin to talk to, yeah?
Thank you. Swan Theatre, Worcester Theatre's last lease of the property expired in 2017. And at that stage, to tide them over whilst negotiations took place about what basis of occupation would be formalised, they were granted a tenancy at will at a peppercorn rental, and heads of terms for a new lease went through various iterations. But once this council took a decision that the Scala would not be the location for a new 500-seat theatre, that obviously kind of reaffirmed or confirmed, and part of that decision was to confirm the future of the Swan Theatre on the existing site. Then both parties, Worcester Theatres and Council, kind of had a long, hard look at what the proper basis of their occupation should be going forward. And obviously part of the consideration was that the building was built in the 1960s, and whilst the council has undertaken several refurbishments to the property, in the medium term, some significant investment will still be required, and that the council, by its very nature, would wish to secure the future of the theatre at that site on the most advantageous terms that we'd be in a position to do. So both parties in negotiations agreed that the situation was suitable for what we call a community asset transfer, taking the form of the grant of a very long lease, a 99-year lease at a peppercorn rental, with Worcester Theatre basically taking over full responsibility for the buildings and the site once the council attended to an agreed list of external repairs. And that basis would not only secure Worcester Theatre's future at the site, but also give them sufficient long-term interest in the site on advantageous terms for them to be then in a position to secure, a better position to secure external funding from our other bodies able to help them invest in the building. And Worcester Theatre's obviously been building up to this point in the sense that they've been gradually building their reserves up to take on some of the responsibilities that are likely to be forthcoming in the medium term. So the recommendation, as I say, is to effect a community asset transfer on the basis of a 99-year lease at a peppercorn. There's a set of heads of terms annexed to the report, which are an agreed set of heads of terms that both the board has agreed, and as officers we're happy to recommend to committee.
Thank you very much. I've seen one hand up so far. Lena?
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the report. It's really interesting. I think it's an excellent idea. I do have a question which I think might come up quite a bit during the course of tonight. The Levelling Up Fund that we've applied for, which we're still waiting to hear, that on the Swan Theatre was going to be used towards an accessible lift. That is potentially in jeopardy, and I'm wondering if we agree to this transfer tonight, what can we do? If that money doesn't come through the Levelling Up money, what can we do to ensure that the Swan Theatre becomes an accessible theatre? Because at the moment it's not, and it's sadly quite poor in its facilities for those who have got disabilities and long-term health conditions.
Thank you. Well, of course, we don't know whether it is in jeopardy or not at the moment. Every time I get a letter from the Deputy Prime Minister, I think that's the letter that confirms or whatever. Today's letter was about planning, so it was a sigh of relief that it was just planning I got today. So I think in all seriousness, we have to wait and see. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we have raised this with the department and it is on the list of things that they have promised to come back to us. So in answer to your question, we simply do not know whether we are going to get the 5 million. In answer to the second component, I think in all honesty that we can, at the moment officers are starting to, as you would imagine, prepare the groundwork, roll the pitch, I think might be the phrase, for the budget discussions later this year. And we are currently putting together a list of budget pressures that we are starting to identify, including some of the things that have been mentioned earlier today, such as ash dieback, for example. So we are producing a list of budget pressures, and as Mark alluded to, that's why we have recommended and members have agreed to set that money aside, so it can be discussed further during the budget setting round. And I think in terms of whether members are minded to fund any shortfall if we don't get the levelling up, that will be a matter for members as part of the budget setting process and the agreement for next year. I think it's fair to say that it was capital money, it wasn't revenue, so you know, we could borrow for it, but of course borrowing money still then leaves us with a revenue pressure to repay the debt. But I think that my advice at the moment will be, let's wait and see what we get in terms of levelling up or not, and then we can have a subsequent discussion about this particular pressure amongst all the other pressures, and there's a growing list for next financial year. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I was sort of edging towards I think if this asset is transferred to the charity at the Swan Theatre, I don't think the obligation should remain with the City Council in terms of putting in facilities for the disabled and an accessible lift. In terms of the lease that's going to be going, is it, I know it's a full repairing lease, but is it a full repairing and renewing lease? And is the obligation then not on the Swan Theatre to install appropriate facilities that are accessible to all? I'm just concerned that so many years have gone by that nothing has been done to address accessibility, and I think it's a shame, to be honest.
Can I just come back on that point? It is a full repairing lease. In terms of the accessibility, Worcester Theatres fully recognise that it's not fully accessible at the moment. And in fact, although we've applied for Levelling Up Fund, it was, of course, in effect a joint application, and Worcester Theatres are funding probably the most significant portion of the cost of putting in a lift to the first floor themselves.
Thank you. Just to throw down very quickly, pending reconfirmation later this evening, I am a member of Worcester Arts Council, in case that's relevant. Under page 39, with risk implications, I'm going really technical with this one. It's stated that should Worcester Theatres become unable to operate the Swan, it would devolve back to the City Council in no worse condition than its current state, which is excellent. I just want to ask the very technical question. Surely the one circumstance in which that would happen is if they were to essentially fold up entirely. In that case, is there any mechanism to protect all of our grandchildren from inheriting a very large maintenance bill should that unlikely event take place? Thank you.
It's kind of catch-22 in the sense that if they're going to fold and the building's going to come back in a dilapidated repair, there's obviously no one to chase for the funds to put in repair. And I suspect that if they were to fold, then that would perhaps kind of strongly intimate that there wasn't a future in the site for a theatre going forward, and that potentially, hopefully many years down the line, if that were to happen, you know, the council would have to be looking at alternative uses for the site. but that's a long way down the line and hopefully will never happen.
I want to emphasise I've got no reason to imagine that this eventuality is likely. I'm just asking a speculative question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Quite philosophical tonight, I think, in terms of my approach to some of these reports, and I think in terms of the Worcester theatres, I think there's two elements here, isn't there? There's one. I mean, if you read this report, it looks like we're facilitating a request, and we're kind of washing our hands of Worcester theatres, and they're no longer a concern of ours in the long term. And I think we're just stepping back from that, and possibly as a result of previous political decisions or relationships, that relationship between Worcester theatres and Worcester City Council has somewhere along the line has broken down in terms of our relationship with them. They are absolutely a valuable asset to this city. They draw in hundreds, if not thousands, of visitors across the year. They provide a valuable service to service users across, and they bring in a crowd that we would never be able to bring in a crowd. And up until, say, 3-4 years ago, prior to the Future High Streets Fund, they were an absolutely key partner we were talking to on a regular basis. So, there is some argument to say where did that relationship go wrong in terms of that, and what led to that circumstances from them being at a arm's length to where we are now. Our leadership approach, as you know, is about a collaboration, about understanding the role of each of our key players within the city, and Worcester Theatres are actually a key part of our strategy in terms of what we want to offer this city in terms of going forward. So there's that element of it. In terms of obviously this request here, this is a request come from the board. They're happy with it. They want it. It's absolutely enables them to expand their offering within the city. Enables them to borrow. But we also need to give credit to them. Actually, if you're looking at their reserves, they've got a healthy amount of reserves in there. They're not poor by any stretch of the imagination. They've managed their affairs well. So the management board that's been taken over, it needs to be given credit for that. So there is a balance that we need to strike. They have got some reserves, and it's a conversation that we need to have to manage expectations. If we aren't able to get a levelling up fund, well, is there a case for them to dip into their reserves, or a conversation that needs to be had, doesn't it, in terms of that? And in terms of their expectations, that's a relationship that I think the council gives us a mandate to go and speak to them in terms of how do we address that situation going forward. As for this report, I absolutely am on board with it in terms of it enabling them to grow and be able to even bring better shows, expand their offering, and do the community work that they've been doing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, I thank you for those comments. They are really important. I absolutely welcome this report. It is a step change. It is a change in the City Council's relationship with Worcester Theatres, with the Swan Theatre. As it happens, I actually went to meet the board of the theatres. It wasn't in the context of this report. It was because there undoubtedly have been difficult relationships in recent years between Worcester Theatres and the City Council. And actually kind of part of that story is in this report. There were negotiations about a lease and how to take that forward in 2017, which were put on hold when the bid for the Future High Streets Fund went in and the bid for the Scala went in. The Swan Theatre is much more than just a building, and is much more than a perceived problem. They have absolutely a place in the artistic life, the cultural life of our city, and that hasn't always been recognised by this council, and if I can say, by political predecessors. You know, part of the reason I say I went to meet the board was, you know, the council is not a single entity, and some of the decisions of our predecessors and the Swan Theatre feeling as though they were sidelined, and they were at risk of having, you know, no home, but actually, you know, supporting a lot of drama, a lot of the AmDram groups that have really, really sort of positive community benefits, and they're increasingly doing community activities with young people and drama classes, and they absolutely want to continue that work, and are really keen to have sufficient funds to do so. Some of the reserves that they have are the sort of post-COVID reserves, if you see what I mean. So I do think, you know, I'm kind of slightly concerned in paragraph 2.3. You know, we've identified a need for costly overhaul of internal heating and electrical services in the meantime. So, you know, if the Swan Theatre, absolutely brilliant that we do the community asset transfer, but I know they will need to look at the financial position going forward, and I think we as a council do. I think the assumption that there is no annual grant subsidy into next financial year is one that we need to put a marker down and to look at whilst we're doing budget setting for next financial year. So if I can sort of, I don't know whether we need to make that a formal recommendation or actually to remember it. I mean, what we've got at the moment says the council will give no guarantee of an annual grant subsidy. It's not saying we won't. I guess what I want to make sure is that we keep it under review in light of their financial circumstances and ours.
If I can just respond on that point, Chair, we have a plan at the moment to bring a report on grants at, I think, the September meeting, or it might be a November one, but that will certainly include that.
Thank you very much. Pat?
Thank you, Chair. I'm very glad you said that we will keep it under review, because it seems to me that we need to keep a close eye on this after the transfer. And I do hope very much that the community asset transfer will benefit them in terms of the money they can raise, the funding they can raise. But there's no guarantee that that will happen. I think that's why, you know, we really need to ensure that we give them the support that they need going forward.
Thank you. So on that basis, the recommendation, you know, what we're actually being asked to decide today is to agree the principle of a community asset transfer of the Swan Theatre to Worcester Theatres Charitable Trust Limited, which is, you know, a big decision. Agree the grant of a 99-year peppercorn lease on the basis of the heads of terms. Agree that in consideration of the value of the asset transfer, the council will give no guarantee of an annual grant subsidy to Worcester Theatres next year or beyond this year, and delegates authority to the Corporate Director, Planning and Governance and the Head of Property to complete the negotiations and legal agreements. So on those, who's happy to support those recommendations? Thank you very much. That's unanimous. Thank you. Conscious. Can we do outside bodies first? Okay. I'm conscious that we've got still some agenda items to get through. I think now might be a useful time to have a comfort break. And then I'm looking to do, for the next item when we come back, appointments to outside bodies. and then maybe the rest of the agenda in order thereafter. Thank you. Oh, 10 minutes? 10, give us 10. Thank you. Door is open for ventilation purposes to stop us all melting. So thank you. Good use was made of the comfort break. So we're going to take agenda item 11 now, which is appointments to outside bodies. Thank you. I think Sian's going to introduce.
Chair, thank you. Yes, you very wisely moved this agenda item up the agenda because some members will remember this can feel like a rather tiring episode of Eurovision at the end of a long night on the vote, and everyone's trying to remember what that song was. Julian's come to the table too. I think the constitutional point is that we only bring you the appointments which fall due. These ones are ones that you either make an appointment to or you don't appoint and the roles are vacant, and you will also have seen the list and taken a view about which of those are more critical to the council than others. I think where we can, it's helpful to make appointments and recognise the kind of continued business of some of these outside bodies. But if there's any that you want to defer, then obviously we are meeting again on the 3rd of September. Thank you, Chair.
So I think Julian's going to read down the list following discussions, and I guess the answer is jump up if he's not quite got it right or we want to make an amendment to what is being proposed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll go through the list and by all means indicate if I've missed something or got something wrong. So I know there have been a few last-minute discussions about one or two of the positions. So, Age UK, Sunil Desera. Angel Centre Committee, there are 3 representatives. The 2 nominations which we have are Councillor Scott and Kerry Hughes. Our 3rd representative was Ala Ditta, but there has been no nomination for Ala Ditta for this particular position. So, effectively, there is still a vacancy there.
I think we're potentially content for him to continue if he wants to.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Archer Steering Group, Councillor Gregson. Armchair Project, Richard Bourne. Claines Charities, Councillors Jagger and Lawrence. Coombe Gardens Hall Association, Councillors Pingree and Kinnersley. Conservation Advisory Panel, Councillors Gregson, Barnes and Cooper. Cranston is Nick Weeks. Dial is Richard Morris. Disability Sport is Councillor Cooper. Fairfield Centre, we've got Councillor Desera. Is there another nomination for this one?
Councillor Kimberley.
Councillor Kimberley is the 2nd nomination for Fairfield. Hello Charities, we have 1 vacancy. The other representative, Councillor Pingree, her term is still continuing. Herefordshire and Worcestershire Integrated Care Partnership, nominee is Councillor Round, with Councillor Wilmore as deputy. Historic England, that's Councillors Gregson and Lewin. Hop Market Charity, there is just 1 vacancy, and that is to be filled by Councillor Stephen. Lippard Hub, 2 representatives, that's Councillors Murray and Collier. The Mayor's Fund, it's the Mayor and Deputy Mayor and Councillor Ali, who replaces Lucy Hodgson, who was previously our representative. Museum of Royal Worcester, Councillor Stephen. Patrol Adjudication Joint Committee, Councillor Riaz. Royal Albert and St Swithin's Homes Charity is Councillors Denham and Riaz. St Martin's Charity, sorry, yep. Okay. St Martin's Charities, though we have 7 representatives in total, they're not all due for renewal or reappointment this year. The ones that are Councillors Denham, Scott and Mr James Carver. St Peter's Charities, that's Councillors Round and Cockerham. St Richard's Hospice, Councillor Riaz. St Swithin's Charities, there is 2 vacancies to consider. Councillor Denham And just want to check whether we have any other nominations. That's the only one we have, I think.
Councillor Scott.
Councillor Scott.
Yep.
Thank you. Shop mobility is currently vacant. The South Worcester Community Safety Partnership, Councillor De Serra. The South Worcester Development Plan Joint Advisory Panel, there's no appointment. I just need to establish, and Councillor Cross has confirmed that he is remaining, so no decision required on that one. The Kiln Kick Board is Councillor Norfolk. The Thomas Corbett Charity, that's the Mayor, Elizabeth Bio, Richard Bourne, Gary Kibblewhite and Councillor Udall. Transition Worcester is Councillors Lamb, Lewing and Cochrane. The Walsgrove Charity, there is no appointment required to that because the charity has reviewed its constitution and will not be continuing. The West Mercia Police and Crime Panel, we dealt with this one back in May when we appointed Richard Udall as their representative. There is an opportunity to appoint a substitute. That does have to be a politically balanced appointment if we want to name a substitute.
I think Councillor De Serra, we kind of put her name forward.
Okay, that's Councillor De Serra. West Midlands Employers is Councillor Denham. West Midlands Reserve Forces and Cadets is Councillor Agar with Councillor Riaz as deputy. Worcester Arts Council, there are 4 appointments potentially. Councillors Kimberley, Smith, Pingree, and I think Councillor Lamb is the other one, if you can just confirm.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. Worcester Bid Board is Councillor Norfolk. Worcester CAB and WABAC is Councillor Round. Worcester City Dementia Action Alliance, Councillor Denham. Worcester Consolidated Charities, this doesn't actually fall due to November, but the proposal is Richard Bourne, who I think is their existing representative. The Cemeteries, Crematorium and Cemeteries Forum, there are 3 positions on this particular body. There are 4 names that have been put forward, and those are Councillors Amos, Barnes, Cookson and Mace. Councillor Amos, I contacted him because he was previously appointed on this body and he indicated a willingness to continue if the committee were willing to do that. But obviously we have 3 other nominations there, Councillors Barnes, Cookson and Mace.
I presume it would need to go to a vote, will it?
I guess, yeah, in the interest of dealing with it procedurally, if I read the names out, I think it's probably best simply just if I go through each name and we have an indication by hands in the air as to whether you wish to vote for the name that I read out. And effectively, you can vote 3 times because we've got 3 nominees. Does that all make sense? So I'll ask, are there any nominations for Councillor Amos? Okay, nobody wishes to nominate Councillor Amos. Effectively, that just falls by default. If you can just do the 3 on block. Councillors Barnes, Cookson and Mace, if everybody's happy with those 3 appointments. Okay, so that's agreed. Worcester Racecourse is Councillor Riaz. Worcester River Sports Association, Councillors Lawrence and Scott. Worcester Six Project Board, Councillor Norfolk. Worcester Theatres Board, Councillor Kimberley. Worcester Trade Justice Network, Councillor Cross. Worcester Twinning Association, Councillors Gregson and Murray. And Worcestershire Waste Management Board is Councillor Cookson. That concludes the, the list of nominations and appointments. So that's all done. Thank you, Chair.
Well done, Julian, and thank you. Do we need to vote on block at the end?
Yeah, if you wish to do one vote now to conclude that all those names that I've read out are the appointments which you wish to make, that would be helpful. Thank you.
So people happy to approve that list on block with the amendments and now of that being a final thing and we can agree those nominations. Thank you. And well done everyone for your civic duty and responsibility. And thank you to Julian for just about staying sane through it all. I haven't signed. Right, so agenda, think of a number. Agenda item 7, Future High Street Fund Programme update. I think that's got your name on it, David.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. I won't go through this in great detail. Most of you will be familiar with the Future High Streets Fund programme. I will just make reference to certain points, if I may. So first of all, if I start with the recommendations, the first recommendation is one for noting the updates. The third recommendation is to note that a further report will be brought to committee in September with regard to the main works contract. But the recommendation that is material is 1.2 in relation to the main works contract, whether we authorise an additional expenditure of 75,000 to meet the pre-contract service agreement as detailed in the report. And just at this stage, I will say that the 75,000 comes out of the Future High Streets Fund. It's not an additional expenditure for the council to consider. So if I just move through the report and draw your attention to section 3, paragraphs 3, 4, 3, 5, 3, 6, you'll see an update in terms of the work for the Scala and the Corn Exchange, as has been detailed with group leaders. We will be bringing a further report to September. Our preferred contractor is currently out at the moment with REBA Stage 4 technical design, seeking costs. We're expecting those costs to start coming in over the next month or so, and hopefully they will come in within budget, and we will be bringing a report back to members in September on that particular item. If I then just move on to the other items briefly, you'll see there is reference to the catering contract. We have been out to tender, we have had interest, and this report simply notes that further advice will be brought to members in due course. I won't steal anybody's thunder by talking about the Creative Consortium and the operating model. That is on the agenda after this item. The Property Enhancement Scheme, I will just draw your attention to paragraphs 42, 43, 44, which set out the amount of the number of grants that have been issued, the amount of grant value that has been defrayed, and the outputs in terms of the property improvements that have taken place. With regard to Angel Place, item 5, the key point to note there is that we will be bringing back proposals to members once we clarify the operating arrangements for the Scala and the Corn Exchange to ensure that there is a coherence and joined up approach between the inside space of the buildings and the outside spaces of the public realm. Are there any other things I wish to raise? I don't think so. I think that brings a reasonably quick summary of the report as it stands. As I said, there's one material recommendation to agree £75,000 from the Future High Streets Fund grant to enable our preferred contractor to carry on with the pre-contract works, and the report on that particular item will come back in September. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Jenny?
Thank you, Chair. Just really on the catering contract, I'd like to think that we'll be looking for a local contractor who will actually provide locally sourced food. Is that going to be the likely outcome?
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Barnes. We're in a live procurement process, so I'm a little bit constrained by what I will say, but I will reassure you that I wrote selection criteria that addressed social value and local supply chains. So that is one of the things that suppliers are being measured on. Other things they're being measured on obviously include their financial offer to us and how they will work in partnership with the new arts charity. So it's most definitely one of the offers and aspects. And there's a number of practical reasons why we would expect local supply chains to be used. For example, the traffic restrictions during the day to the building mean that you need to time your deliveries and you sort of need to know the area. So I think that it doesn't necessarily mean a local contractor, but local supply chains I think will definitely be part of the model, and it's in the evaluation criteria amongst other factors. It's a live procurement process. We have not delegated authority to officers to award the contract. We've reserved the decision of the award of the contract to come back to committee. So you will see that under a pink paper in due course.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mace?
Yeah, thank you very much for the report. It's just a brief question. So the Angel Street South footway works. I'm glad to see that the footway is going to be expanded and refurbished later on. Now there are a good number of Sheffield stands there. Can we make best efforts to make sure that all of those are retained or expanded, and with some LTN 120 compliant storage for cargo bikes and trikes and those kind of things there, please?
I think it's just worth me saying at this stage, I don't know what the final specification for that point, that area is, but I'll make a note of your points. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The enhancement programme, that's a really good news story. At Planning Committee last week, we had the Heritage at Risk Register. From the discussions we've had, heritage buildings can be notoriously expensive to renovate, and this has helped a number of properties come back into use for economic benefit and some homes. So I congratulate the officers on it, and hopefully more of these projects to come, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Probably a minor point to the report, but in terms of Angel Place and the recent report in the national media about the declining availability of public toilet facilities, WC facilities, and highlighting the urgent need for those facilities to remain open and available, particularly considering the wide variety of conditions and people now face under that. So just re-emphasising the importance of those, and us negotiating a position with Crown Gate if our facilities are going to close.
I can give some assurance.
Can I just respond to that?
I was going to respond to it, that's okay. Because I actually had a meeting this afternoon as part of my kind of, talking to stakeholders around the city with the agent for who now own Crown Gate. It is no longer Crown Gate, and he gave me assurance of their intention to continue with public toilets, potentially with a refurb and an entrance fee similar to the ones in Angel Place that the council run, but he certainly is not now intending to close them.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to, just so there are no surprises, I think that the toilets in Angel Place will need to close during the construction works. So just so everybody's on the same page, we will have to close those for the construction works. But as the Chair says, hopefully there will be sufficient alternative toilets in the vicinity, particularly now that the owners of Crown Gate have changed their view with regards to closing the toilets at the bus station. Thank you.
guess there needs to be a level of coordination that both sets are not closed at the same time for refurbishment. Any other questions? Edward?
Just a very brief one. Firstly, to say thank you again to officers for arranging for us to have the chance to once again see the inside of the building. I know there's been a couple of similar visits, but I think it was extremely helpful for us to have the sort of illustration of seeing it in person and being able to sort of see the incredible space that exists within the building. I also really want to say thank you and applaud the team for including and consulting with local arts organisations. I think it's really important that we do that, and I was wondering if there's an opportunity at some future point to add into our policy that similar projects relating to the arts should always include this type of consultation exercise. I think it's a model of good practice. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments? No, thank you. Yeah, I mean, thank you to officers. It is a really useful... Sorry, Pat.
Hugely important, Chair. I just wanted to say really that the various articles in the newspaper, you know, the local newspaper, have raised a lot of interest, and there's quite a lot of excitement out there about what we're doing with the building. And I keep getting asked questions. This is great news. I think there's going to be good use of the building, and people are getting very excited about it. So, you know, thank you.
Thank you very much. So this report, you know, it's a very useful, important update about the future High Street Fund, and a reminder that it is a whole range of projects and not just the Scala and the Corn Exchange. And as Councillor Lewin said, the fact that we've actually brought derelict with some funding, it's levered in further investment, and 5 derelict buildings have been brought back into use and 19 residential units. So I always say the city centre is more residential than most people realise, and it's even a bit more now on Angel Street, so thank you. So the recommendations: to note the updates in relation to the main works contract for the Scala and Corn Exchange, authorise additional expenditure of £75,000 to meet pre-contract service agreement costs as detailed in this report from funding that we have for future high streets, and note that a further report will be brought to committee in September with fully costed proposals for the main works contract for the Scala and Corn Exchange. All those in favour? Thank you. That's unanimous. Well done. So now agenda item 8, which is the exciting bit, because we haven't seen this as a paper. This has come to committee, this level of detail, for the first time. So is this you, Sian, to talk about?
Thank you, Chair. It's my pleasure to bring you this report, which is part of the Future High Streets Fund programme, as we've just been talking about. This is specifically asking the committee to consider and approve the first business plan for Scala Arts Centre and the operating model, and inherently the decisions and investments and next steps that need to be made around that. Obviously, it needs to be recognised, as we just discussed on the last item, that this is very much subject to the affordability of the construction contract and those decisions that need to be made in September. This is a separate report. This is about the Scala Arts Centre business plan. And the reason that that's separate is that officers and members, irrespective of faces changing around the table, have been of one mind for some time that members should be satisfied, and officers should be satisfied, that there is a robust business plan for the operation of an arts venue before any construction contract is let. So that's why this has come now, and the construction decision follows. And as you know, that work is still ongoing and those costs are coming. The other thing I want to say to set the scene, I appreciate it's a big report, and I appreciate that number of members were able to come on the site visit or meet some of the consortium previously. And, you know, I must say there's been an excellent level of engagement from between conversations between members and officers. So I'm really grateful for that. But I just wanted to set the context again, which is, again, whatever the origins of the funding from government, this is an absolutely transformational sum of money, capital funding for a major city centre regeneration opportunity, buildings acquired, and a really strong statement from the City Council that, based on previous council supports for arts projects, it was time to make the next level of investment in arts in the city. And again, that's been a principle that's received wide agreement around this table. The capital funding that was awarded came with no revenue, so in terms of any operating model, whatever was put in the building, whatever that use was going to be, irrespective of whether it was an arts venue or any other venue, there was no revenue. That's the basis of the government funding we received. I think it's really important to put that on record because sometimes the council gets misquoted on that. Having said all that, it is a transformational opportunity and it's one we wanted to take. And when a decision was made last year that because of the escalation of costs, it would not be possible to deliver the original project, which was a 500-seat auditorium, then again, members decided we should do a stakeholder engagement exercise and really listen to what the arts community said would be of value in the city. That itself was building on previous feedback that there was an appetite for a mixed-use performance arts venue. And again, I won't rehearse, this has been through committee a number of times. There was widespread support for you know, an arts centre, a mixed-use arts venue, a community arts venue, any form of words you might use that describes the variety of different creative uses. Arts centre is a very normal term, and there are arts centres in most big cities and major towns around the UK. So arts centre we are. The consortium and the organisations that form the consortium were born out of that consultation exercise. And the consortium members knew each other, but they didn't know everybody, and nor did the council know everybody. So it's been an excellent opportunity to really gel a group of leading local arts organisations. And they are C&T, Seven Arts, Dance Fest, Mobilise, Vestan, The Kiln, and the individuals who've been living and breathing the development of a business plan for the last 9 to 10 months now, every week, have been Paul Sutton from C&T, Elaine Knight and Alex Green from Seven Arts, Kitty Ross from Dance Fest, Hannah Phillips from Mobilise, James Anderson Brown, Veston, Hamish Gill, The Kiln, myself as corporate sponsor, Angeli Fowler in the community engagement team, and Jamie Fox as Future High Streets Fund programme manager. And perhaps you might think that's a lot of resource, perhaps you might think that's not a lot of resource, but obviously we're embarking on a really significant endeavour to create a whole new organisation and to identify and deliver on arts needs across the city. So we have found plenty of things to do to keep ourselves occupied. The real timescale has been the construction contract being let. But using the time wisely, we've really explored what is a business plan and what is needed both for the council as the initial investor and any future investors. And we have spoken to the Arts Council and we have taken advice from 2 separate independent experts who have no stake in the project at all, and they have provided some steer and some advice on a mixed revenue arts centre operating model. We've also been to various places and built either new connections or established from existing networks with other art centres, operators, promoters, producers. And what we've really has been at the core of the model is trying to make a virtue of these multiple smaller studio spaces with a prime city centre footfall opportunity. So it's the ethos of an art centre, that it's a place that you can go in and it will be accessible and there will be something to look at or sit and do, and it's a daytime and evening place that feels like it's for everybody. That fits well with this asset in the city centre. So that's a really good opportunity. Again, for us, this builds on the investments we've made in the arches and the money we had through the Cultural Development Fund. And in the business plan you've seen also, we've talked about all the ways in which community arts and heritage and culture and raising Worcester's aspiration as well as celebrating our own is ripe for, as I said before, the next level of investment, which is, you know, a destination in the city centre. The organisations that the council's been working with, they've got over 30 years pedigree in terms of delivering arts in Worcester and delivering arts in the West Midlands. And they're a very well-connected bunch of individuals and organisations. And it's the organisations who've kindly lent their people to this commitment because they can see that there is most definitely something for their organisations in this and also for the greater good of Worcester. I'm not obviously going to talk you through the whole plan, you've got obviously the benefit of the covering report itself, which is quite comprehensive, and then the business plan itself at Appendix 1, which I hope everybody's had the chance to look at. It is built around the idea that this is a place that can deliver so many outcomes for Worcester people and put Worcester on the map a little bit more in terms of cultural leadership. There's clear vision, mission, aims and values. And then when we talk about the operational model, we're very specific about what that should be. And setting up a charity at arm's length from the council is the most normal and fundable operating model to attract other forms of grant funding. So there may be other reasons for doing that, but that's a really key financial imperative. That if you were looking for funding from one of the major national trusts and foundations, and we've been advised that we should and we could, firstly, the council's investment needs to come first, and secondly, it needs to be a charity. So that's been a steer. You'll have seen from the report that we've taken, again, independent legal advice that's appended to the report. You'll have seen that a key aspect of this is a collective creative voice. And although there will be a conventional charity at the heart of this that will hold the ring, the business plan explains all the ways in which we expect to have a collective creative voice in terms of the delivery of the plan and the stewardship of the programming as that goes forward, both in terms of a creative panel that sits outside of the charity, opportunities for people coming through, talent development, trainee opportunities, and also the plan talks about the networks and links that we want to build and solidify with other partners in the city. The plan is realistic and acknowledges that revenue sources need to be found separate to pure creative programming, and it identifies food and beverage revenue stream and commercial hires revenue stream as two of those fundamental underpinning sources of funding. Again, that's based on advice from art centres that are successfully operating and have weathered the storms of different changes in Arts Council funding. So I think what I wanted to say in terms of the business plan is really, I think that really you've got to sort of read that and get a feel for it. I can't really, I think, probably do justice by walking through every section. So I really wanted to come back to, if the council is the investor, well, what is the investment? And the investment is revenue support in the initial period. So there is a request to make working capital available for this quite significant startup period. The building is under construction, as you know, for the best part of 2 years, just under 2 years. And again, we were advised that that's not an excessively long time to create a new art centre. So, you know, I'm sure, again, we'll have plenty of things to do in that programme. But there needs to be working capital. And you'll have seen the milestones that explain how that working capital is required. It isn't about employing all the staff at the outset, clearly not. Many of the staff get employed much later, closer to opening. But you need some posts in place early on. And you need to start building up your audiences by doing some programming activity. And we've also been advised and understood that having some programming and startup events in the city will itself help attract funding. So again, it's about starting to now walk the walk, really. In terms of ongoing revenue support, we then have done a lot of work modelling the budget and doing sensitivity analysis around the budget, and the budget has been built by people in the consortium who've got experience of running venues and running festivals from zero base budget positions. And so the budget's in the spreadsheet, every line item and everything is costed. It isn't about working back from a figure, it's everything cost built up. It does rely on income from commercial hires and revenue, but not exclusive, and food and beverage, but not exclusively. It's definitely a mixed revenue model. And in terms of the risks that sit around this, the risks as we go forward are principally financial ones, I would suggest. So if we can get past the letting of the construction contract, then we're into making sure that the amount that is spent is affordable, stays within the plan, and can deliver an arts centre that people are excited about, that can attract further funding and programming opportunity, and isn't too tame for fear of you know, exceeding its brief. But at the same time, we've got to be prudent and think about the long term and make provision in reserves as we start to operate the new organisation. So clearly, there needs to be a revenue support grant from the council for the first couple of years. We haven't said it's for 3 years and then it's nothing. We've said add it to the medium-term financial plan from 2026 onwards. I mean, I'm very happy to take questions on that. I'm sure Shane is too. You can probably see once you've read it why it's difficult for us to say we can guarantee you by the end of year 3 we won't need the council support. You can see from that the ambition is to attract 1 or 2 significant grants, and you can be assured that this is a model that serves other places well around the country without large council subsidies. But this is a new organisation and it needs to go on that journey. So in the early years, there will be some apron strings between the council and the trust. And again, I think that's a safe operating model. It isn't the case that we want to create the charitable incorporated organisation before Christmas and give it a lease. That wouldn't be a safe thing to do. The council is the client for the works contract for 2 years. And then we need to decide, is that the right time to transfer the lease or not? Our assumption is it would be. But all these things and all these risks and eventualities are things that we can discuss at committee at future points. This is the model that gets us started and makes the investment that we need to get going. I think there's probably a lot more I could say, but I'm going to pause at that point, Chair, and take questions.
Thank you very much. Yes, there's a lot of information here and a lot of thoughts. So hands up. Councillor Round.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, a really comprehensive report. A lot of work has gone into it. I'm really, really excited about what we're planning. It's always have been supportive of this venture, and I know quite a lot of has had to go in the last 12 months in particular when the original idea had to be changed to this idea. It is very exciting, it's very ambitious. I'm fully supportive, but I do have a lot of significant concerns. The first concern I've got is who's going to be responsible? I know that in the document you talk about the lease terms are going to be discussed nearer the time, but I think that's a fairly fundamental point that we need to be aware of now. Who's going to be responsible for the ongoing maintenance of the building in the future? So the building is going to be renovated now, but in 15, 20 years' time, it's an old building. They always drain money. Who's going to be responsible for the maintenance of that building? Are we going to pass that on to the consortium as a full repairing lease, or will that responsibility and that obligation stand with the City Council? And that's my first issue of concern. The second one is in relation to the legal costs for the setup. The City Council will need to get external legal advice to make sure it's protected, and the consortium will need to have their own separate legal representation. Who will meet their legal costs? Are we as a City Council funding that out of the money, or what's the plan for that, please? And I've got loads more, but I'll come back on that later. Thanks.
Through you, Chair. Thank you for your questions. I think it's really important at the outset, actually, that I distinguish between consortium and charity, because it might crop up otherwise tonight. So the consortium is the group of people representing organisations who've brought us to this point, and we've been a collective project team. That's not to say that the consortium then form a charity. That's to say that the charity is a group of trustees in the ordinary sense, and that they will employ people And the consortium is a group of organisations who see themselves as having roles in terms of programming into the Scala. I mean, some of the consortium may want to be employees in the future, but this is, I know that sounds like pedantry, but I think there's so much, I just kind of want to get us going on the right footing. And I think that we should talk about the new charity, because that's obviously the entity. In terms of the new charity, it is a model elsewhere that maintenance sits, is a shared responsibility, where the council is a landlord of an arts building or another building in the city, and we've got examples of that ourselves in this city. So it wouldn't be unusual to not pass over all of the maintenance obligations. I have also worked somewhere else and seen all of the maintenance obligations passed over to a theatre, and the theatre having not made provision in their reserves for the maintenance, and then everybody agreeing that a better way to have done it would have been for there to be a service charge, so that they didn't have to worry about wanting to factor in the maintenance costs themselves. They knew the council was going to do it as long as they paid the maintenance charge. So the cost needs to sit ultimately in the charity. I don't suspect it can sit there for the first couple of years without that looking insolvent on the balance sheet, frankly, but in the long term it needs to sit there. But how that's dealt with between the council and the charity, there are different ways of doing it. I think what the council really needs to be assured of is that the maintenance is happening and that a budget is being made for it. So ultimately, the revenue that's generated from this venue needs to be able to pay for maintenance ultimately.
Thank you, that's great. And in terms of, I was confused between the charity and the consortium, and that's great. But how about the legal costs in terms of setting up?
So the legal costs setting up the charity, we've got a budget line in for that. We've had a quote to do that already. The actual incorporation of a CIO is quite affordable now because it's a standard template. So that cost is in there. What we would do is, obviously, the council will fund the costs of doing that, and the duty of care and the advice will be for the benefit of the trustees of the new charity. We will prioritise that, and that advice should be capable of being shared with the council in terms of substantial common interest, you know, the sort of rule, our regulators' rule. If there was any reason why the council couldn't rely on or see the charity's advice, then we would obviously need to take separate advice, but I would prioritise the charity having the independent legal advice, and we would fund that.
Is that okay then? Yeah. Alex?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for all the hard work that's gone into the business plan. You know, there's an incredible amount of detail in there, and it's really, really good to see. I'm not really going to comment on the overall business plan because I've not run an arts centre, and I don't feel well positioned to comment on how there should be, how the business plan put for it. There's a couple of comments in the business plan that I did want to raise, which was 5.16 on page 77 mentions about a key activity in year 0 being audience development and testing. And it will involve taking work to communities. I think it would be an excellent idea to keep that going across the city to make sure that we're taking arts out to the more distant areas of the city where people don't get into the city centre that often. On page 76, 5.13 talks about a membership programme, but for creatives, artists, professionals, and community people. And I know something that the Regal does in Evesham is having a membership programme with 2 different levels of £30 a year and I think £100 a year for patrons. And I don't see anything mentioned that makes me think that's been considered in here. So I think that's a really good way of allowing local people to feel invested in the arts centre, and gives them some benefits to that membership, and obviously it's another source of revenue. The 2 questions I would have is the first is maybe the simpler question. On the list of risks, it talks about if the food and beverage partner is, we're not able to find one. Are we happy that that risk also covers if we have a partner then it's not able to fulfil the contract? Because I know at the Hive, the Orchard Cafe was the original provider for the cafe there, and they weren't able to fill the contract and subsequently withdrew from it. And the second one is, I think absolutely we should provide revenue support to give them the runway to get started and get set up. I think the question, having heard Jesse talk about this in previous meetings as well, about whether or not we were going to be providing long-term revenue support, is whether we can make sure that we come back to that decision in 2 or 3 years to see if they're continuing that, because I wouldn't want it to get lost in the medium-term financial plan and just be an ongoing thing that carries on.
Through you, Chair. Yes, absolutely, thank you. I'll go take them in reverse order again. So revenue support for how long? Absolutely agree. And I think if I was sitting on your side of the table, I think it is a key question. And I'm happy to agree any mechanism that keeps that at the front of everyone's minds. But hopefully you've understood my candor about kind of it is what it is until we know more. But at the same time, that doesn't mean we should be complacent. So at the moment, it's just add it to the medium-term financial plan for that year. What the recommendation says is delegated authority to agree the terms of an initial funding agreement. I would expect I would need to be clear with members if we were going to make a 3-year funding commitment, for example, then I would suggest we've got time between now and opening to agree that that's what that's looking like, but you could decide to make that decision consciously instead of this rolling annual thing. So I don't disagree. I think it's a key point and we should return to it. But also in the early years, other funders will look to see if there's a funder at the table already to give them confidence. And there's something creative about, you know, this phrase match, isn't it? Match funding, and being able to say the council's match has enabled this to happen, and particularly around the strand around talent development and opportunities for people to come and get their first work experience or their first place to put on a small show. We've understood that the value of our match in that environment is likely to be really quite significant. So what I suppose the other thing I wanted to come on to with that is it kind of comes back to the council and councillors holding offices and the new charity to account for all of those outcomes we've listed, all the things that you want to see happen, skills development and social and community cohesion and employability and stuff. Being really clear, did those things happen, and challenging. So it's not just about handing over a grant, it's being really clear what we're getting for it. And I think, again, if I was sitting on your side of the table, I think that's kind of only reasonable to want that. So I think you can definitely, you know, ask me to bring the funding agreement back and we can scrutinise that as a group. I think that's only right and proper. I think the other thing I'd want to say about the membership programme, very much so, we did have reference in there to sort of fees and income and sponsorship and membership subject to terms. We didn't want to push our luck and assume that everyone wants to sign up on day one, but we do totally agree that there's a groundswell of positivity in the early days that you want to get hold of, where you want to have a group of people that you can communicate with and you can get their feedback as a kind of captive audience about what do you want to see at the Scala. And if a membership fee is giving them access to some tickets or a family fun day that you don't get without the membership, then again, we've understood that that's really normal in the sector. So we had assumed it, but we didn't kind of want to scare people off by suggesting it was a membership model, because again, that sounds exclusive. So that was that one. And then lastly, the point about taking work into communities, absolutely agree. And that's been one of the biggest successes of our Cultural Development Fund initial funding legacy, was the Communities Festival strand. And also we've understood that for funders, it's more and more important to take work into communities. And the Midlands Arts Centre and Scala Sangham, so I'm calling it Scala, Cala Sangham, which is Bradford Arts Centre, both of them are able to say, our audiences come from these postcodes, and we want to go to these postcodes because we don't get many people from there. So we've put some work on, and we've had those really practical examples. So we've really understood from lots of venues how much they're using data now. And so the taking work to communities isn't just about now just kind of like making something amazing and taking it. It's about a two-way conversation. And then the F&B risk, yes, there is a risk that the F&B provider doesn't succeed. Again, we're in a live procurement. I would say we've had good interest, and we've been talking quite openly about commercial terms. And what we have got on our side in this model is a city centre venue that opens directly out onto the street, and we're offering a fully refurbished venue. And it's not a cafe within an arts centre out of town. It's you know, it's got the capacity to have some standalone access itself. So again, hopefully that's a bit of a natural mitigation. And also we've just tried to make sure that the food and beverage numbers in the business plan aren't excessively inflated. It's going to be on both parties to work hard to get, you know, the weddings or the corporate hires or whatever that will bring in the extra money. I'm really sorry, I forgot to introduce Paul at the back. Would you mind doing that?
I didn't know whether you were sitting there incognito. So we are being watched as we speak by Paul Sutton from C&T, who is absolutely one of the leads for this, and very much his handiwork is in this business plan. So thank you. Thank you for coming today, and it's also an opportunity to say thank you so much for coming forward, and the other members of the Creative Consortium. You know, we had a number of interesting conversations in opening up the opportunity for community engagement, and put our faith in the creativity of the people of Worcester, and you know, those that came forward and that are working on the project. We're really grateful, so thank you. Alex, did you want to come back on?
It was just a very brief point. I think I wanted to say the thing I'm most looking forward to is having a space in Worcester to show independent film, because we don't have something like that at the moment, and that would be absolutely brilliant to have. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, as you know, Sarah and I are substituted for Mal and Jessie, so we've had a discussion amongst actually the 5 Lib Dems, and there is some. We'd like to see this project do well, but we are a little hesitant, apprehensive. We want to see it go well, and we do want to see, but we do want to see it budgetary controlled. But one of my points to my group was there's an element to this venture that is not got a price, and that is how much good feeling, how much it brings in, how much people in the local area will be proud, and how much footfall it will improve, and that area desperately needs improving. So I as somebody who's been to number 8 at Pershore, someone's been to the courtyard in Hereford, and someone who loves what was done at the Countess of Huntingdon Hall, I think the opportunity to take a wrecked building that could just sit there and crumble and turn it into a vibrant centre that people are really vying to get into, and I think they will, then I'm going to travel, hopefully. and so that's the way we're going, I think.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Jabba?
Forgive me, Chair, I've written an essay for you in terms of that. Just stepping back a bit, Chair, just in terms of actually how we got to this the stage that we're in. I think it's important to reflect on that as well, in terms of where we were possibly 2.5, 3 years ago, and the direct intervention, yourself and this council made in terms of stopping in what was a ideologically driven agenda to fit a 500-seater theatre. For all intensive purposes, if you read between the lines of the items that we've had on this committee meeting today, was to eliminate the Swan Theatre. It was designed that way. It was a line in the policy to sell off the Swan Theatre as a capital receipt to fund it and find a new home for the Swan Theatre. So if you read it between the lines, it was the original plan. Some may read, and I've read it that way, and some may agree and some may not agree, was to destroy the Swan Theatre and exactly where it stood and bring it here. What we do know now, it was the wrong plan for the wrong place, and it was a forced agenda that was never going to work. And our intervention was timely, and this council backed that intervention, and this is the position that we find ourselves today. So ideologically, the top-down decision, forcing a decision, whereas what we've managed to achieve here is completely the reverse in terms of actually going out to our communities, going out to our arts organisations, finding out the common endeavour and the good what we can achieve in terms of getting those organisations. So I thank completely those organisations that put their neck out on the line to say, hang on a second, for all intents and purposes, there is going to be benefit for those organisations around the table, but they realise that the bigger project here and the bigger achievement from Worcester being able to leave on it, not only politically, but from an officer level. You talk about, Sean talks about the 30 years of pedigree. I mean, some of the key ingredients here, not only obviously experience, we've got experience from the Arts Council, we've got independent validation from arts organisations and specialists that have looked at the business plan. We've got people that know Worcester and have got a number of different bases covered in terms of to be able to what a modern art space or centre looks like in terms of being able to offer and achieve as much market demand as possible in terms of that. So they've ticked that box. Most of all, they've got the passion and the belief, and the vested energy that our officers have put into this shows the commitment and how highly they value it. And in particular, obviously, Seven Arts and Elaine and Anjali and Sean yourself, in terms of how you've taken it forward and you've fully backed it, and you've come up with a plan that is deliverable, that somebody can, that we can get behind, and that can people in the city can believe, that will give them what they've never experienced before. A mixture of old and a mixture of new, as Councillor May says, in terms of independent cinema and what people reminiscence of what was the Arts Centre, in terms of bringing that into the the 21st century and offering what is severely needed in terms of the city centre. We talk about actually, the previous slogan, quite rightly, that the government had about levelling up. I mean, what was levelling up about a 500-seater theatre? Let's be honest, what was levelling up? Whereas actually, if we look at what we're trying to achieve here in terms of skills development, opportunities for growth, for young people to learn, develop their arts, and then go out and be able to practice, that's real levelling up. That's real investment in our young people, in our arts and in our culture, that will make a real difference to people's lives and their. So I'm incredibly proud of what we've achieved here. We've got the right people around the right table, and they've got the vision and the belief to be able to make this a success. And I'm proud, actually, of everyone who's helped us to get this stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Pat?
Thank you, Chair. I think this is a very, very impressive project. Sian, you've talked about the importance of the startup funding and implicitly the leverage that can engender. And I think that's hugely important. And most of us around this table are volunteers. We're politicians. We don't get paid for all the hours we do. I think we appreciate the effort that volunteering is about, and it matters greatly to us because we're volunteers ourselves. And that leverage, all those volunteer hours that have gone in are tremendous. You can see that in the business plan. And I've had experience of leveraging £500,000 into this city before in funding, and I know that it can be done with enough determination and effort, and I think that's going in. And I hope very much that when it comes to costing the funding and so forth, and what it can achieve, that all that voluntary effort will be in there as in-kind contributions, because that is greatly impressive to some of the major funders that we're going to be looking at here. I think, someone like the Lottery or the Arts Council really do look for that kind of effort. They look for the in-kind effort just as much as they look for the financial side and the match funding, but they do look for match funding as well. And it looks to me as if it's there, at least for the short term. And, I've got great hopes of this. Congratulations.
Thank you. Katie?
Thank you. Yeah, really excited by this. Really excellent, thorough first business plan here. I am already getting excited at the prospect of, a place, a venue that I can take my sons to and they can really enjoy. Now, forgive me though, my question is just about, because I don't usually sit on this committee. I wouldn't put business plans in my immediate skill set, but looking at the projections for revenue, and specifically looking at year one and the weighting given to public and private income, I'm really painfully aware, because my own involvement in charitable organisations, of the fragility of kind of a grants-based approach to funding and really how risky at times that can be. So I just wanted some assurances that the projection is created from sort of a typicality of this sort of sized arts-based venture, and which other centres have we compared ourselves to, or is it that because of maybe a promise of council funding, that's the match funding idea partly answers that? So I'm just slightly worried about the percentage of the private and public income. Just reassure me.
Thank you. I think it's a very fair question. I think that the way that this has been conceived is to not assume that there's one big ticket grant funder who's going to come and fund all the core costs of running the venue. Because what we understand from funders is that your sort of core costs and your more mundane posts, your crucially important person who locks up, your duty manager jangling the keys, those aren't posts that typically get funded by arts funders. They're all the posts that make things happen. So there's a core cost that's unavoidable of having a city centre building with an open access ethos. But the costs where the funding opportunities that lend really well to this are the ones around creative producers and collaborative programming, putting on festival stuff, youth outreach, training and development opportunities, where the council doesn't need to put its funding in is the professional view, because that's the funding to chase. What the business plan doesn't do is assume that it only works if we get one big item of funding. What it assumes is it's kind of this 7 pillars model of constantly adapting. So, for example, independent cinema, the view in the sector, tested view is it's not particularly profitable. It's profitable, but it's not particularly profitable. And we've checked that with Midlands Arts Centre. We're sort of Midlands Arts Centre, I hope one day will be Midlands Arts Centre Little Sister. They're certainly showing us their rundown, and in the same as Hereford Courtyard or Bradford Arts Centre, they're able to say our income comes from here, then here, then here, then here, and they know all that, and they know how to flex that. So I won't name which one, but one of them would say, so we think we're going to do this, but then we get the opportunity for a commercial booking for this. So then we renegotiate dates and kind of move that because we need the commercial income. And one of the first things we were told on one of our site visits was you really need some really good software, and you really need a real agile sort of operations manager, because you're constantly flexing, getting the income in and not turning away the income sources whilst leaving enough space for the creative programme. So answering your funding question, it doesn't assume one big arts culture fund, but it does assume that the running costs will be funded from revenue from food and beverage and hires and a council grant in the early years. And it's the scaling up and down point, really, that if that didn't come to pass and we couldn't get a really good grant that we wanted for something really exciting, perhaps that's the activity we can't do, or perhaps we scale down the opening hours, or we have a different view that Mondays are fallow days because we're going to do commercial hires instead. So it's that scaling up and down model. Did you want to add anything, Shane?
Yes, through you, Chair, just in terms of the assurance point. So, you know, I'm no expert on running theatres by any means. So when I was asked to have, well, yeah, or arts centres, sorry, old habits. When I was asked to have a look at and participate in the budget development part of the business plan, what I will do is apply what, you know, the sort of process that you'd apply under any circumstances, and that is to try and understand whether the costs and the income which have been projected are based on a methodology. You know, it's not so much is that the right methodology or have you got the right figures, but just to know and get assurance that it's not a finger in the air or somebody's guess. And so I was able to look at the details of the budgets and could see how that methodology had been built up, and the fact that it was iterative. So it wasn't just, well, there's, you know, year 3, that's the budget. It was a year 0, a year 1, year 2, year 3. So it was built up over time. So that was very reassuring. The second thing was that the people who created the budget had gone to the trouble to, you know, get advice from a number of other places. So this is very much built on what we've seen elsewhere. And I comment on the financial implications on that point, that this is something which is seen to happen across the country. So it's not just been built in isolation. And the third thing was just to seek some feedback from external parties. And I'll just read one, which was from a very experienced person who's worked in this field for many years, who I won't name, but he says, "I have read and created a lot of business plans throughout my career, and this is one of the best I have seen." So there was a good process and a very robust process for trying to test the business plan as it went through it. Some people did an amazing amount of work, astonishing amount of work to get it in shape. And I'm content that this is a sound proposal.
Thank you, Chair. This report, the business case and everything, it's a culmination of a huge amount of work by so many people. Thank you to absolutely everybody for their commitment to this. Particularly when you go around, you see a crumbling building. That requires huge vision and belief as well in what you're looking at and aiming for. When you go around and look at this garden, you see how crumbling it is, you see how desperate it is. It's on the Heritage at Risk Register again. It's an area of the city we're looking to regenerate. And I was really unhappy when this first came, when I realised, you know, we're just going to do something like Malvern Theatre, where lots of people cannot afford a £30 ticket to see a London show. And this instead is doing all the kind of things to engage the families and people of Worcester, local people, and enhancing the arts, which has been neglected by the last government hugely across the country in lots of different ways. And I think we're bucking the trend here. We are saying that arts are crucially important to our city, crucially important to our residents, and we have got the confidence, and with the help of all the people who've been in the consortium, and you Sian, and your team, and the councillors around the table, having the confidence to get to this point. Huge achievement. It's a line in the sand for me that you've got to this. It's absolutely brilliant. I want to kind of clap. I am hugely concerned about the construction costs. I hope that construction costs nationally are going to start coming down and will benefit us. I hope that the construction team will be looking for best value at every opportunity to make this affordable. And of course, it could be that some work is continued at a later date. And enhancements later, but it's about saving the building from crumbling. And of course, the opening is mid-2026. I know how quickly this year has gone. I can see this sitting around this table in 2 years and going, where did that 2 years go? You know, so get your outfits. That's what I would say. You know, let's get some space in the diary. Don't plan your holiday around that time, because I'm sure we'll all want to be there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all those. Oh, and another one. Steve.
Thank you, Chair. I won't be long. I don't have any long, difficult questions to ask, but fantastic words by everybody, and you know, I wholeheartedly agree with all the comments that have been made about, you know, what a wonderful position the consortium have brought this to now compared to the original concept. I think looking at the risk register, my sort of biggest concern is DLUC, and obviously with a new government in place, viewing the allocation of these funds as potentially being vanity projects of the previous government. There could be sweeping decisions made at the ministerial level to cancel, you know, even at this late stage. So that's my fear, that a fantastic project like this that ticks so many boxes and will be you know, a game changer for Worcester City might not appear on the radar of the people that are making those decisions. So I guess it's a challenge to us as a council, but maybe Labour group as well, a friendly challenge. If you have any back channels to big up this project, to say, yes, it might well have been, you know, the previous government's folly, but it's now looking amazing and, you know, does tick all the boxes. I would implore you to use whatever channels you can. Should we be lobbying as a council? And I know obviously David is doing so directly to the department, but do we have a joint letter to the minister? I don't know, but how can we preempt you know, a decision that doesn't take into account the fantastic work that's been done here?
Yeah, I think the council have had a number of funding streams, so I think it's important to clarify what this one's about and what, so there's no confusion. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure Shane may wish to add to this, but just to be clear, the Future High Streets Fund money, we have received it. It's sitting in our bank account, so we have it, you know, and unless somebody's going to come down and, you know, I was going to say, you know, raid our bank, it isn't, you know, there is no, I don't think there's any intention for it to go back. I know nationally a number of local authorities have struggled to spend the money that's been allocated, but you'll see from the discussions we've had today with regard to this particular project and the previous update on the whole programme of Future High Streets Fund, we're not in that camp. So, so the money is with us. I think that, you know, bluntly, the issue is going, as Karen says, we're all sitting here on slightly nervous tenterhooks looking to see what the budget's going to come in terms of the construction costs. That's the main thing. But at the moment, I think we don't, you know, we just need to hold the situation and wait until we get an answer on the construction budget before we do anything more. But as it stands, I don't think there's, I'm slightly nervous to say there's no chance. Of course, you know, nothing is certain, but the money is with us, and so assuming we have the sufficient funds to deliver the project within budget, the money is with us and we will deliver the project. Thank you.
Yeah, so what Sean is saying is within the cultural, levelling up cultural development fund, the 5 million is some additionality, you know, and a number of projects. That's the bit as referred to earlier that went and during the general election went on and sat on a desk in Whitehall. So we are awaiting the person who's found it at a desk, as are other areas, in order to get feedback on that. And absolutely, our MP is fully aware of that and the importance to Worcester of getting that funding, but we don't yet know. But I said no, the capital investment, the original capital investment, we have it, and whilst it's sitting in the bank, it's also usefully earning interest, which is helpful, but we do want it to go into a building. Lena.
Thanks, Chair. Just a very quick one. It's so lovely to hear everyone speak in the room about the project and the excitement that everybody has and where we've come from. It was great to hear from Jabba about, you know, how this project evolved and how we got to this. It's really exciting. I just want to know, we have been criticised in the past as a council about the costs that we've incurred on this, and I wouldn't be doing my job as a council if I didn't sort of be doom and gloom a little bit. Is there any way, does this come back now regularly, this business plan, to committee, or is there a steering group of leader and deputy leader who's monitoring the business plan and the costs? How does it work practically going forward now? Because I'm just worried that we're going to say, oh yeah, it's great, off we go, and then nothing ever happens, and then we don't know what's going on. I think we need to be really, really careful about the costs. So I just want to know what the process is now, please.
Through you, Chair. Yes, I'm grateful. We do need to have a robust discussion about risk and responsibility. We do, and I think these questions are. I welcome these questions. On this particular one, the Policy and Resources Committee a couple of years ago, when Worcester started receiving capital grants, we set up the Major Programmes Member Reference Group. So the Policy and Resources Committee mandated the Major Programmes Member Reference Group, which is group leaders and deputies, to have oversight, and as I say, it's a constitutional decision, so it requires officers to do it, for the major programme reference group to steer the path of major projects, both on their way up to committee, on their way back down afterwards, so the recommendations for approval and the implementation of those. So this project remains within the purview of the major programmes member reference group until the project is delivered. So then we probably do need to have a discussion at some point about when is the project delivered, because it was a capital fund. And I think it goes back to Councillor Mace's point about what's the mechanism where this a revenue grant support commitment is reviewed. So I'm very happy to suggest that we put a milestone in. We could amend the recommendations and say that officers will bring a report back, you know, in 12 months to confirm the provisional funding settlement for the next period or whatever. But we need a kind of a mandate from tonight that in principle you're supportive of this sort of level of investment, because obviously budget planning from now on in, we will start factoring those numbers in. So sorry, it's quite a long-winded way of answering, isn't it? So the governance mechanism that you've got that you can rely on is we're required to go through member reference group and to share budget information, and that meets every month. Yeah. Every other month? Every month. Every month. But then in terms of actually the annual revenue commitment, at the moment we only say introduce that into the MTFP. So we could look at a different mechanism. I don't know what you think, Shane. We could say come back before the budget setting in 2026.
Any key decision is coming to P&R, and you know, this is the first point. The business plan has only just been produced. It is here for approval. The Scala project is an ongoing project that is part of the council and will also be monitored as an ongoing project, won't it? I think in some senses it's early days, isn't it? Because we haven't yet voted and done the recommendations, and it still isn't. It's an evolving business plan that hasn't yet got kind of absolute milestones and absolute kind of funding, has it? If you see what I mean, it's an early stage. It undoubtedly will be coming back here to this committee.
So there are two aspects. That one is the regular cycle through the budget setting, so it will form part of that consideration. But also, as I mentioned earlier, we are now in a regular position of reviewing our grants to external parties, so in part of that consideration as well. So it will be kept under review.
Thank you for that reassurance. I think it's just because obviously it's an evolving project, and I think a lot of us around here are obviously pretty terrified of, you know, the risk exposure, and it's just about making sure that we're scrutinising as members. But I'm more than happy with what's been said. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, if I can say my bit, I'm really, really pleased that we have this business plan, that we have got to this point in the Scala project. And I'm just, the vision and the mission that the Creative Consortium have come up with, this is about bringing life to a building. We had a building that was going to be regenerated, prettied up, redesigned. This is the life. This is bringing life to that building, and it's Worcester people, Worcester organisations who are committed to the city that are bringing the life to the city, and I think that's tremendously exciting. Really grateful that people have done that, are doing that, and this, you know, this is an ongoing journey. So the vision, the Scala will be a centre for creativity in Worcester City Centre where everyone feels welcome. I think that's, I didn't write it, I wasn't part of it, but if I was going to, I couldn't wish for anything better than to have that delivered in Worcester. And a mission to enrich and diversify Worcester's cultural landscape through ambitious and exciting programming where communities, artists, participants and audiences can connect and create. And I know absolutely, because I don't think we've quite said it yet, the aim is to be additional to the current cultural offer within the city and absolutely not to compete with what we already have. This is a new offer for audiences whose need is not currently met and audiences that will come newly to the Arts Centre, which I think actually was the original kind of purpose of an arts centre, an arts venue that would bring people to the city. Julian, do you want me to read all the recommendations out for the sake of the tape? Okay, bear with me, people. My public speaking slot. The recommendations are that the committee approves the first business plan for Scala Arts Centre as set out in the appendix. Approves the principle that a new charitable incorporated organisation should be established to manage Scala Arts Centre and delegates authority to the Corporate Director, Planning and Governance in consultation with Chair and Vice Chairs of this committee to take all necessary steps to establish the Scala charity and secure the appointment of the founding group of trustees. Notes the planned actions to establish the operating model during the construction period until the buildings can be opened, and agrees to allocate funding in the sum of £300,000 from the outturn surplus that we noted at the beginning of this committee into a reserve to be drawn down to fund these actions. Agrees to allocate annual funding in the sum of £150,000 in the Council's medium-term financial plan as a core grant to the Scala charity in support of Scala Arts Centre once operational, with effect from April 2026. Delegates authority to the Corporate Director Planning and Governance and the Corporate Director Finance and Resources in consultation with Chair and Vice Chairs to establish detailed terms for legal agreements between the Council and the Scala charity to secure funding and property commitments, and notes that decisions on the construction contract for Scala and Corn Exchange are yet to be made and will be brought to committee in September. All those in favour? Thank you very much. Thank you. It's an important moment in the life of our city, so thank you. Right, we've still got a bit to go. We're not doing too badly. The end of PNR is in sight. Agenda item 9, referral report from Communities Committee on the recommissioning of the Worcestershire Promoting Independent Living Service. Who's going to speak about that? Thank you, Shane.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of housekeeping items to finish with, really. So the Promoting Independent Living contract is due to finish in March 2025, and we propose to renew it. And it is fully funded from the Better Care Fund. Insofar as that continues to be provided, then there is no reason why we shouldn't continue to use it to fund this activity. So the report went in detail to the Communities Committee, which considered it in detail and resolved to go ahead and seek to procure that contract using the Better Care Fund. But as members will be aware, it's the limit of financial approval for the committee is £100,000, so therefore it needs to come to this committee purely in terms of approving the funding element to that. So there's no financial implications for the council as long as that external funding continues.
Thank you very much. Any questions? No. Thank you to Communities Committee for looking at this. So the recommendation is that this committee approves the use of the council's annual Better Care Fund allocation to fund the council's annual contribution to the Promoting Independent Living Service contract for the period 2025 to 2030. All those in agreement? Thank you very much. Agenda item 10, insurance contract. Last one, and this is you, Shane.
Thank you, Chair. I get all the best ones, don't I? The insurance contract is renewed every 3 years or so, and is generally been done over the past couple of years through a consortium across Worcestershire, and is a very robust, very effective process. Gallagher's charges a very small amount of money to do this on behalf of all the councils, and because of the timing, it was necessary to delegate that to me to undertake this process. So it is primarily a noting report, but I did undertake at the last, when I saw the delegation, to bring back a report of the results. So this provides that. It has resulted in a supplementary estimate of 36,942 for this year, but having renewed my car insurance yesterday, I confirm that 17% is just about the going rate at the moment. So I'm happy that it was a very robust process, and this does represent value for money. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I hope you shopped around suitably for your car insurance.
As always.
Thank you. Yeah, Councillor Lawrence.
Just one quick, it's about the dates. I was a bit confused because there was something about it elapsing on the 30th of June and it's not starting until the 1st of July. There were some various sort of, is that I take it I've just misread, or that we didn't have a day without insurance, or is that just the midnight thing, or midnight thing?
Yeah, just so concluded at 11:59 and 59, and then started at 0001 the next day. So yeah, I think there was no break in coverage. No.
Any other questions or comments? I guess it's kind of illustrated the benefit of being in a group for this particular thing. Thank you. So, recommendation: committee notes the outcome of the process for renewing the council's insurance contract, and we approve a supplementary estimate of £36,942 for the financial year, which is the additional cost.
Very quick one. Obviously, in terms of new developments that we do, for example, Purdiswell, we've done that for the football pitch, and obviously the improvement in the Scala that we're going to do. So how do you calculate? Do you do in-house adjustments to add to the value? That doesn't obviously need to come back to any committee, does it?
Through you, Chair. No, there is an annual process of review. So the revised premiums are then built into the budget through the budget cycle process. Yeah, so it does come back, but through the normal budget setting process.
Thank you. I'm not going to read the recommendations again. So, as previously read, all those in favour? Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm not aware of any other business. Julian's shaking his head. Thank you very much, everybody. A marathon, but some important decisions, and thank you for all your contributions.
Yes.